I've been talking a ton of running back draft advice for this upcoming season the last couple of days here. So in this video, we're going to be switching things up a little bit and now pivot to the wide receiver position. I did actually just release another must draft wide receivers episode about a week ago, so check that out if you want. But today we're going to be talking through 3 more players that I really like at this position group and at their current draft positions. All 3 of these players have the talent and capability of being a significant lineup contributor this season and could be some of the biggest impact players in our teams. Don't overlook these players on draft day. Kick back, relax, and let's get started. All right, here we go. So I apologize for those of you that watch every single video here on the channel. I'm sure you've taken in your fair share of Allen Robinson rants so far this offseason, but I just can't bring myself to not talk about him again. He's one of the players that ever since he signed with the Los Angeles Rams, I've been super pumped for in terms of my fantasy football expectations for him this season. I think the outlook is phenomenal, and I really love the dynamic that could possibly play out here between him and Matthew Stafford. I think there's a whole lot of upside here. The beautiful thing with Allen Robinson is that week-to-week floor value that he's been so well known for throughout the last few seasons, despite having absolutely atrocious situations with the exception of last year. He's been one of the most highly utilized and targeted wide receivers in the NFL. He's had numerous, well, I shouldn't say numerous, but he's had either 3 or 4, I forget the exact number. I want to say 150 target or more seasons. So he is getting a lot of opportunities. This is a player who is a clear alpha wide receiver 1 on the majority of NFL teams this, not this season. I mean, yes, this season, but he could, the point I'm trying to make here is that he could act as that top option in probably half of the offenses in the NFL. He is that talented. He is that player. His routes are phenomenal. His ability to win catches in contested situations are fantastic. He's got great hands. You could go on and on and on here. This is one of the best and most fundamentally sound players at the position in our league, and he is, of course, a very, very refined player, a veteran, and someone that has all the tools you look for. So I'll take a step back here and stop raving about the player that is Allen Robinson. I love watching his tape. I love watching his film. A super exciting player to watch just in terms of his craft. But right now, in fantasy football purposes, in terms of, how this relates to your fantasy teams for this year, A-Rob is currently going as the 4th selection off the table in the 4th round of 12-team formats provided by Underdog's Best Ball ADP. I say this almost every video we talk about ADP. They're the best in the game. That's the most accurate data and resource to take a look at. But when we're talking about the wide receiver position in a bubble here, this does place him as the wide receiver 18. So basically take the league size you're playing in, whether that be a 10-team league, 8-team league, heck, 4-team league, or for the purposes of today and most videos, what I typically do is just for a standard baseline, I will reference a 12-team format. So he is a middle wide receiver 2 based off of that grouping. Essentially what I did there to get that estimate is you take your first 12 wide receivers. Those are the top options on every team if they were to be distributed equally. So numbers 1 through 12 are those wide receiver 1s. Numbers 13 through 24 are those wide receiver 2s. 18 is right in the middle of those 2 numbers. So therefore, he is a middle tier wide receiver 2, or at least that is what ADP tells you. Now, I think that A-Rob's floor is essentially this draft capital investment. He has seen some slight progression on the board here. Throughout the recent month, I would say August was a fairly positive month for his ADP in terms of the stock price, if you want to think about it that way, rising in terms of it's costing a little bit more to draft Allen Robinson here in August than it was costing in, say, June or July when he was he was a late 4th to early 5th round pick. But I still really, really like him here. I think we're drafting him pretty dang close to his fantasy floor. And again, that fantasy floor is very, very solid. Last year, I think, was more of an anomaly than what some people might want to tell you that he fell off a cliff. Last year's Chicago Bears offense was a nightmare. It was a disaster. It was arguably the most ugly offense to watch in the NFL last season. It was painful to watch. As someone who had a lot of shares of Allen Robinson last season, I was of the group last summer that was really hoping and optimistic for a huge breakout year for Allen Robinson, taking that floor value to the next level. I thought Justin Fields' downfield passing ability would kind of uncork that a little bit and kind of break the ceiling off of things. But what I failed to account for is in my draft day evaluation of Justin Fields, my flaws, the things that I saw that were poor about his game, translated right over to the NFL. And unfortunately for Justin Fields, those flaws being holding the football for too long, taking too long to get through your progressions, when you have an absolute garbage offensive line like the Bears have, those mistakes, despite the fact that your level of competition was raised and emphasized, those mistakes just get put under a microscope. They get that much worse, or not mistakes, rather your flaws, your imperfections as a player, rather, because I think that Fields could certainly get better at this. I think he'll be a lot better at it this season. Hopefully he's going to have to be, because that line is honestly and arguably worse than it was last year. So basically the point I'm making here is that Allen Robinson is a beautiful route runner. He would separate. His tape showed him open and wide open at times last season, frequently, rather, not just at times. And this is a guy who just wasn't able to get the football in his hands at a high level because the quarterback play and offensive line collectively was so poor. So why am I so excited about him? It's the transition to the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I know there's another camp of Debbie Downers out there with the Cooper Cup, the committee of the Triple Crown winner last year, saying, hey, we've got a guy who saw 145 receptions last year, led the NFL in receiving yards, touchdowns, targets, catches, all that great stuff. Yet, I think that we have to be realistic with ourselves here and project a fairly, I'm not going to say significant, but a substantial enough level of regression that this offense will produce multiple fantasy relevant players in the passing game. And Allen Robinson has a big deal and a great amount of responsibility for that. I think that Allen Robinson is the best number 2 wide receiver that Sean McVay has had at any point in time during his tenure with the team. Robert Woods is fantastic. Brandin Cooks, who, spoiler alert, I'll actually be talking about a little bit later in today's episode, he was fantastic. However, A-Rob is better than both of those players. A-Rob is going to absolutely live and work in the middle of the field, crushing second-tier coverage with Cooper Kupp sucking all the attention his way. Not to say he's not going to be open. He's not going to be a top 3 fantasy wide receiver because, I think he is still going to dominate. He is still that guy. Him and Matt Stafford still have that chemistry. But there's absolutely room for A-Rob here. You see last year, to kind of a smaller scale, but look at Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Sorry, I blanked on the name there for a second. Both of those players were beautifully fantasy successful and relevant with a perfect ceiling floor combination incorporated into that offense with great quarterback play. Now, maybe Matthew Stafford, you can surely make the argument he isn't nearly the player that Justin Herbert is in terms of a raw arm talent, but he's got a lot of veteran savvy, poise, and he's got himself one heck of an arm as well. So to say and assume that an offense, especially a high-functioning offense like the LA Rams team is, can't produce 2 highly effective fantasy wide receivers would frankly be clownish behavior. Look at the 2019 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't want to make this comparison because the Rams will have many more positive game scripts and will be a much better team. They are, after all, the defending Super Bowl champions. But think about the 2019 Tampa Bay Bucks, led by Jameis Winston, a big arm quarterback who would gun it downfield, wasn't afraid to take chances, and he supported 2 top 5 fantasy wide receivers, Mike Evans being the wide receiver 5 in fantasy points per game, and Chris Godwin being the wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game in the same year. Again, this team is more balanced. This team is a lot more, how do I want to word this? They are a lot more poised, a lot more disciplined. That's the word we were looking for. This team is a lot more disciplined in how they're going to approach each play, each snap, and I think they're a lot more meticulous than that team was in terms of their execution. So the numbers won't be nearly as gaudy, but what A-Rob will give you is some flashes and some kind of, dipping his toes in the water in terms of testing out that ceiling value that we haven't really gotten to see him with on full display. It is kind of sad that he isn't the true number 1 in this offense. That is something that we do still have to account for here, but he's a very, very good player in a very good offense with by far and easily, it's a runaway here, the best quarterback play of his NFL career and honestly of his entire life. So Allen Robinson for me is a draft day smash in the fourth round, currently of our 12-team half PPR formats. Sean McVay had to go and, basically put it all on the line to sell ownership on offering a very, very heavy wide receiver 2 contract for this roster. Rumors are that McVay loves him. The Rams coaches love him at camp. He's tearing it up. I expect he will do so all season long. Brandin Cooks is our second player I want to talk through in today's video. Someone that I haven't given a fair amount of respect and attention this offseason, but lately my head has turned his direction in drafts, and I can't really stop myself now. It's become a thing that actually in the draft guide, if you guys haven't checked it out already on sizzlefantasy.com, you can get access instantly to all of my must-own players at every position in every round of your 2022 leagues based off of my evaluation, my rankings. On those pages, you can click straight on a player's name. It'll take you over to their in-depth player profile with notes I've taken on pros and cons, injury history, basically every important piece of information is tied into those. The point being here is that Brandin Cooks is someone who pretty much after I stop recording today's video, I need to go update that draft guide and slide him in here because this is a new find for me. This is someone that I've come around a lot more on here in the last few weeks. And I really hate to say this, but the main thing that is kind of pointing my head that direction is the John Mechie news. Now, terrible, terrible stuff. You hate to hear of any health risk or concern for any player. I was really excited about John Mechie. The reason I'm moving Brandin Cooks up my rankings and I'm so confident in him is because I expected Mechie to have a very legitimate role for that team. I thought he was going to be the big slot option, eating up underneath volume, being a really good run after catch player for Davis Mills, a guy who has really good timing on his routes as well. I thought he was going to be a large factor, and now, again, unfortunately, very sadly, he will not be at play this year. So Brandin Cooks is once again kind of the lone dude. He is the lone wolf out there looking to make some noise for this Texans offense. And he showed us last season with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, he is very, very capable of having productive seasons. I did want to mention to you guys, if you want to check out those draft guides on sizzlefantasy.com again, make sure you go check that out. You can scan the QR code in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and it'll take you over to a page that outlines exactly how to get access to those guides. One of those being Underdog Fantasy. There is an invite link in the description of today's video. If you sign up using code SFS on Underdog Fantasy and deposit $10 or more, they're going to double your money up to $100, so you could potentially put $100 in and get another $100 for free to play with. And the draft guide's free. They send me emails every single morning with updated lists. I just fulfilled a couple of those actually last night, so make sure to check that stuff out. That's an easy way to get draft guide access and in-season lineup advice through the whole season. So make sure to take advantage of that, you guys, or again, scan that QR code and potentially the Underdog pop-up will show up on your screen as well to take you over there to figure out. You can watch a tutorial video that I put together for how to actually make that stuff happen. So Brandin Cooks here is the wide receiver 25. He is going at the 4th pick in the 5th round, so we are moving back here just slightly in terms of ADP, in terms of draft value. Again, the John Mechie situation has opened my eyes a lot to Brandin Cooks here. And when I went and looked at kind of the historical outcomes for Brandin Cooks, and when I thought back to last offseason, the offseason before that, my draft evaluations of him, this dude is the CEO of draft day value. He's never valued properly or evaluated at the level that he deserves, and ultimately he's disrespected every single time in terms of where he ends up going off the draft board. This is a vertical playmaker, a guy who makes splash plays in his offense. He can win vertically, he can go underneath, he does basically everything the Texans ask him to do, and I'll make the argument he is by far the best player on the field of the 11 guys on that Texans offense every single snap. It doesn't matter who else is in or out of the game. So This is a must-own player in the sense that he plays for a crappy team. They're going to have negative game scripts. I'm assuming that they're still going to be, crawling back into games or at least attempting to late. His second half game script will be very, very favorable in terms of passing volume. And for a guy last season who had 14.5 fantasy points per game scored and finished as the wide receiver 19 in again, points per game scoring with Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills. Tyrod Taylor now is with the Giants. Davis Mills is entering into year 2 as the training camp starter where he was a rookie 3rd-round pick last year. I'll take a guy who had 133 targets, a 26.9% target share of this offense, and a guy who is 16th in air yards. Again, speaking to that downfield passing volume, not like elite or anything, but it is something worth noting because he is very proficient in that area and running those type of vertically pressing routes. So to me, this is not a league-winning player, but this is certainly someone who is a bona fide lineup stud. He could be your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, whatever the case may be. You're getting some good value and some really good wide receiver depth here at the 5th-round position, which is certainly not a guarantee for some other names on the board. So if there are other high upside pieces that are not hanging around anymore, maybe Juju's went off the board, Rashad Bateman's gone, Brandin Cooks is a perfect name to take a look at. And again, he's a proven commodity. He's a proven asset. We've seen it year in and year out. He has finished as the wide receiver 22 or better every single season with the exception of 1 year in his NFL career dating back to 2014. So you've got a large sample size, a large body of work. This is a stud, high upside wide receiver 2 that can go bonkers in any given week and is being drafted as a wide receiver 3 right now, frankly. The first wide receiver 3 in that grouping, and yes, he'll probably finish as a middle to low end wide receiver 2 if he stays healthy, but that value is there, and thus, the reasoning for selecting him on draft day. Adam Thielen, another veteran wide receiver being poorly underrated. This one makes me sad. Thielen is currently the wide receiver 33, and this is coming from a Packer fan. So as much as I dislike the Vikings, this is some ridiculous draft pricing here just in terms of the discount we're getting. He's the 9th pick in the 6th round of our league, so nearly a 7th round selection. I've had a lot of success just waiting and grabbing him in the 7th round, but I'm more than happy and excited to draft him earlier than that in the mid 6th round even. It's a great value, like I said. This is a player who is a touchdown magnet. The football basically just comes straight to his hands in the red area. Kirk Cousins is looking for him. I would argue he's his favorite target inside the 20-yard line and looking to score 10 touchdowns this past season in just 13 games. That placed 7th in the league again in just 13 games, 14 in 2020. And this is a guy who this past season had dealt with some injury issues as well. The rumors and reports are out of Vikings camp, he looks fresh. He looks back to his 2016 to 2018 self, that being, widely considered the prime of his career and when he was a very, very monstrous fantasy target. So this is a guy who I also love the offensive situation he's walking into with Minnesota here. Justin Jefferson's been raving about Kevin O'Connell's basically pseudo Rams offense here, saying he understands now how Cooper Kupp is wide open all the time. Thielen will benefit from that as well. This is another player kind of like Allen Robinson where you're seeing him as a player who could be a number 1 for an NFL offense. Yes, he's a veteran. Yes, he's getting up there in age, but the mismatches are evident. Working against number 2 corners is not something that Adam Thielen should be doing, and he will totally destroy those guys when given the opportunity. So with the reports, the positivity, the touchdown production, after all, I've bashed on Adam Thielen and faded him last year because of the touchdown dependency. We now have 2 years of very strong production in that area of the field, showing somewhat of a sustainable trend. So at the end of the day, it is the fastest way to score fantasy points, and I'm not going to just let those points slip by the wayside. So I'll be taking advantage of that. I'll be drafting Adam Thielen this year. I encourage you guys to do the same, and I encourage you guys to like today's video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. We're constantly looking to grow here, help out more fantasy players, and obviously secure as many league trophies as possible during the 2022 season. I appreciate the heck out of all you guys for watching and staying tuned in today's video. Check out some of the links in the description of today's video before you head on out. Check out sizzlefantasy.com. Check out the draft guides. Check out the community Discord server. Get a hold of me. Get a hold of other players watching the videos and playing fantasy this season. We've got a ton of stuff to have a good time with. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that great stuff. I'll see you all there. Get a hold of me. Peace out.